May I help you?
The Hayat Fal Philistine. Wabushnia. Altar!
The movie opens at a remote chateau in Trieste, Italy. A U.S. Army Special Forces counterterrorism unit is on a covert mission. Their objective is to recover a stolen Russian nerve agent called DZ-5. The team advances in tight formation, clearing the chateau with military precision. What begins as a silent infiltration quickly erupts into a full-scale assault with controlled gunfire and explosions as the soldiers make their way through the building. Despite their precision and expertise, one of the team members gets hit. They finally breach the room where the DZ-5 is supposed to be stored, only to find it empty. Moments later, Rat informs Colonel Travis that Collins has died from his wounds. Travis is furious that the team has lost a man and the DZ-5 was not recovered. 3 months later, we meet David Grant, a U.S. intelligence analyst taking flying lessons. He's skilled but clearly unsure of himself, doubting whether he's ready to fly solo. His instructor insists he's capable and tells him to relax.
Relax and fly the plane.
As David prepares for his first solo flight, his colleague stops him to give him some important news. David is in his office watching the news of the kidnapping of El Sayed Jaffa, a notorious terrorist, attending his daughter's wedding and him being handed over to U.S. authorities. A colleague reviews the intelligence report and claims there's no sign that Jaffa's second-in-command, Naji Hassan, was present at the wedding. David disagrees, insisting he's certain Naji was there. In Athens, passengers begin boarding Oceanic Flight 343 bound for Dulles, Washington. Flight attendants, Jean and her colleague, assist the travelers as the cabin fills up.
I didn't do it on purpose.
On the flight deck, the pilots complete their final checks and the plane takes off. Later that day in London, a man walks into the Marriott Hotel and detonates himself, shouting, "Listen to the sound of Ulta-R."
May I help you?
The Hayat Fal Philistine. Wabushnia. Altar!
On board the flight, an elderly man retrieves his bag and enters the toilet. While Jean presents a gift to her friend Allison, the man assembles a modular handgun and prepares a small explosive. He steps out of the toilet and it is Naji Hassan, the mastermind behind the operation. He hands the explosive to a young accomplice, who uses it to blast his way into the cockpit. He strikes the first officer and forces the captain to follow a set of coordinates at gunpoint.
Reduce your airspeed as indicated. Maintain your course, Cap. Careful. I am a pilot.
Meanwhile, a recorded message from Naji reaches the American Embassy in London, officially declaring that Oceanic Flight 343 has been hijacked.
I have a message for the American president. I am in control of Flight 343.
A large man ambushes Allison in the pantry and retrieves a stash of hidden weapons from the refrigerators. He distributes the firearms to his team, who quickly terrorize the passengers into submission. Amidst the panic, one passenger discreetly hides his gun and badge.
Now calm down! It's over! Right? It's over.
Jean and her colleague are forced to sit down as the hijacking unfolds. She notices the passenger manifest, which identifies an armed U.S. air marshal on board. Taking a huge risk, she quietly removes the manifest and hides it inside a magazine while Naji is distracted on the interphone. Naji asks her about the manifest, and she calmly tells him that she destroyed it. He checks the trash, finds nothing, and warns her that it was unnecessary to hide it. Back in Washington, David is at a fancy event, flirting with a woman, when an officer pulls him aside for an urgent phone call. He returns to his office and learns that voice analysis of the Flight 343 transmission and London phone call confirm it is Naji Hassan. Nancy informs him that General Wood has summoned him to the Pentagon for an emergency meeting, chaired by Secretary White in the president's absence. She also reveals that Colonel Austin Travis is leading the counterterrorism operation. David arrives at the Pentagon and passes Colonel Travis, who is disappointed seeing him. Inside the briefing room, they play the audio from Flight 343. The caller, identifying himself as Al-Tar, demands the release of El Sayed Jaffa. In return, he offers to free half the hostages for fuel and $50 million in gold, threatening an even larger bombing in London if his demands aren't met. David confirms it is Naji Hassan. As the room discusses options for handling the situation once the plane lands at Dulles, David grows increasingly desperate. He warns them this isn't about hostage negotiation or freeing Jaffa, it's about a planned attack on the United States. He reveals that Naji is now in possession of the missing DZ-5 nerve agent, which is on board the aircraft.
Covert operator sent us on a wild goose chase.
David explains that Naji intends to detonate it over Dulles using the plane as a bomb. While he doesn't know the exact quantity, he stresses that even a single drop of DZ-5 would be enough to kill everyone in the room.
And by the way, the name he's using, Altar, in ancient Arabic means revenge.
Back on the flight, Naji speaks with an obviously worried Senator Mavros, saying the press already sees him as the future president and that it's an honor speaking with him. In the meeting, they note that Flight 343 will reach Dulles in less than 8 hours. They're left with two terrible options. Ignore David's warning and let the plane land, or destroy it before it enters U.S. airspace, killing all 406 passengers on board. Colonel Travis proposes a radical last-ditch plan, a Hail Mary. He brings in Dennis Cahill, an ARPA engineer, who explains the existence of the Remora, a modified aircraft designed to transfer crew at high altitude. Although Cahill confirms that the system has never been tested on a commercial airliner, Travis argues that it's their only chance. He asks Cahill and David to join the mission and provide their expertise. David agrees immediately. Cahill, clearly shaken, is far less confident about heading into a live military operation. Colonel Travis and David arrive at Andrews Air Force Base, where his team is already standing by. They head into a hangar and get their first look at the Remora, the specially modified aircraft built for mid-air crew transfer. Cahill warns them that weight is critical and the equipment load is too heavy. Travis immediately orders the team to strip down to essentials, only weapons, communications gear, and sleep agents. The Remora takes off and climbs to cruising altitude. Colonel Travis briefs the team on the plan. Baker will go in first to establish communication between Flight 343 and the Pentagon. David will stay aboard the Remora, advising the team using his knowledge of Naji. Once on board, the plan is to release a sleeping agent into the cabin's air system, take control of the aircraft, and divert it to a military base in Greenland. The soldiers remain calm, used to missions like this, but David is tense as this is completely new territory for him. Naji orders Jean to look after his men. She asks to serve the passengers as well. Surprised by her courage, Naji allows it but warns her not to try anything foolish. When Jean goes down to the pantry, she discovers Allison's body. Cahill explains that the team will enter Flight 343 through the avionics hatch near the front of the plane, giving them about 4 hours to complete the mission. Travis sternly clarifies that once the transfer sleeve is properly pressurized, Cahill will go inside and wait until the entire team is aboard the aircraft. Only after that is he to return to the Remora.
I'm an engineer.
That's it!
The Remora intercepts Flight 343 and begins a delicate mid-air approach. Cahill guides the pilot into position, and with precise maneuvering, the aircrafts lock together. Cahill activates the system, extending the transfer sleeve. Once the pressure stabilizes, he opens the hatch and climbs through, followed by Baker. Inside the plane, Baker disables the cockpit warning light triggered by the open hatch. As the rest of the team starts climbing aboard, heavy turbulence slams into both aircrafts, sending them lurching violently and throwing everyone off balance. Cappy loses his footing, slams his head, and is left hanging unconscious. The Remora pilot warns Travis they must disconnect immediately.
I can't hold it! Close the hatch! Close the hatch! Close the sleeve!
Seeing Cappy dangling, David climbs up to help. Together, they manage to pull him inside, but the pressure on the sleeve becomes critical.
Listen to me! Listen to me! Someone has got to close the hatch now or we're all gonna die! Do it now!
Travis, unable to climb due to the turbulence, makes a split-second decision. In an act of sheer bravery, he seals the hatch from the outside and is thrown from the sleeve at 33,000 feet. The Remora pilot ejects as the aircraft breaks apart. Back at the Pentagon, no one knows if the team survived or even made it onto Flight 343. The team is shocked by the sudden loss of Colonel Travis. With their leader gone, everyone is shaken, and the audience who thought this was going to be a Steven Seagal movie is caught completely off guard. Cappy regains consciousness, and Baker examines him, confirming a broken vertebra. They sedate him with morphine. Up in the cockpit, a screen malfunctions. The first officer heads to the avionics bay, escorted by Naji. The moment the hatch opens, the team below goes into hiding. As the first officer inspects the equipment, David steps forward and quietly signals him to stay calm. He hands him a blown circuit board and gestures for him to look around. The officer notices the military team and the American flag and immediately understands. He climbs back up. Naji also takes a quick look but finds nothing out of place. Back in the cockpit, the first officer tells the captain it was just a blown circuit. Rat steps up and assumes command, ordering Baker to contact the Pentagon. Baker reports that the comms unit was lost during the transfer. Hearing this, Cahill panics, convinced the Pentagon will destroy the plane. He breaks down and tries to rush off to negotiate with Naji, but the team restrains him and calms him down. David refocuses them, insisting they still have time. He urges Rat to find Naji as everything revolves around him. Rat quickly lays out a new plan. Baker will set up the cameras and mics so David can identify Naji, Louis will search for the bomb, Cappy will handle disarming it, and once David identifies Naji, they take out the terrorists. David also tells Rat that he doesn't know what Naji looks like, but he can recognize his voice instantly. Rat and Louis begin searching for the DZ-5 and the bomb, while David maps the aircraft on a computer. Baker and Rat then set up cameras and microphones across the plane, and David marks each section, identifying the number of terrorists and their weapons, and listens to the terrorists, but Naji is nowhere to be seen. Frustrated, Rat pulls David up the elevator and above the cabins so he can watch the live feeds himself. David scans every camera but still can't find Naji and concludes he must be in the cockpit. As Rat lowers David back down, Jean spots him. David quietly signals her to stay calm. Just then, Naji approaches. Jean bravely confronts him, questioning his motives to buy David some time. Naji tells her to step away and checks the elevator but notices nothing suspicious. Once clear, David tells Rat he heard Naji's voice. Moments later, Louis radios in that he's found something in the forward baggage compartment. Urged by his aide to seize a political opportunity, Senator Mavros approaches Naji to negotiate. Naji acknowledges the offer and tells him he'll call on him when the time comes. David meets Rat and Louis and is shocked to see the amount of DZ-5 attached to the bomb.
There's enough nerve agent here to wipe out half the eastern seaboard.
Back at the Pentagon, officials identify the bomb maker as Jean-Paul Demuth, a former nuclear engineer. Secretary White delays the strike but keeps the F-14s on standby. El Sayed Jaffa is released and instructed to convince Naji to divert the plane to a remote location and free the passengers, while making it clear that Flight 343 will not be allowed to enter U.S. airspace. Cappy examines the case and confirms it's a highly sophisticated bomb, complete with its own hard drive, electronics, and a pressure switch. Because of his injury, David suggests Cahill assist Cappy with disarming the bomb, and Rat reluctantly agrees. The plan is set. Cappy and Cahill will work on the bomb while Rat, Baker, and Louis move to take out the terrorists. When they realize they need one more armed man, David volunteers. Cahill is visibly terrified as he faces the bomb. Following Cappy's guidance, he carefully studies it and cuts a few wires. At the same time, Rat, Baker, Louis, and David move into position for the assault. Rat prepares to trigger a device that will kill the cabin lights. Cappy inspects the bomb and confirms it's safe. But suddenly, the device buzzes with activity. He immediately tells Cahill to warn the team to stop the attack, explaining that someone has just run a test and has an override switch. Moments later, Cappy collapses. Cahill fears he's dead until David comes over, checks him, and confirms he's only unconscious. Shortly after, an OK status appears on a passenger's pocket computer. El Sayed Jaffa is airborne when Naji calls him, with Pentagon officials listening in. Pleased by Jaffa's release, Naji declares he will strike deep into the heart of the infidel. Jaffa warns him that the Americans know his plan, but Naji cuts the call. Naji then informs his men of Jaffa's release, and they celebrate. Secretary White orders F-14s to intercept Flight 343 and attempt to divert it away from U.S. airspace. On board, Naji's second-in-command questions why they aren't turning back now that Jaffa has been released. When Naji claims they've been chosen for a greater cause, the man insists Jaffa is their true leader. Enraged, Naji kills him, terrifying the rest of his men. David briefs the team on what happened, realizing this confirms the bomb is being controlled remotely by a passenger. He and Cahill attempt to disarm the device when Cappy wakes up just in time and stops them. The team sets up a camera near the elevator and uses the interphone to contact Jean. David reveals he's the man she saw earlier in the elevator and tells her about the bomb and the remote. Jean agrees to help, searches the cabin, and identifies a passenger with a pocket computer at seat 21K.
21K!
At the Pentagon, the president authorizes the shootdown if the plane gets too close to U.S. airspace. They have just over an hour left. As Cappy and Cahill continue working on the bomb, it's remotely tested again. Panicked by the sudden activity, Cahill cuts few wires randomly. Cappy is furious, realizing they were working on a decoy all this time. Using the cabin cameras, Rat and Louis monitor seat 21K. They can't get a clear view of the passenger's face, but he matches the profile of Jean-Paul Demus. Meanwhile, Navy fighters intercept Flight 343 and order it to divert. Naji enters the cockpit as the jets visibly arm their missiles. He calls the Pentagon and demands the fighters stand down. To prove his threat, he executes Senator Mavros. With the plane nearing the fail-safe line, Secretary White prepares to end it. The jets move into position when suddenly Flight 343's tail lights start flashing. David and Baker have found a way to communicate via Morse code. Requesting 10 minutes, the Pentagon, now sure that the team made it on board, orders the fighter jets to pull back. Cappy and Cahill uncover the real bomb hidden beneath the decoy and are scared by its complexity, almost impossible to disarm in the circumstances. David assumes Cappy and Cahill have already disarmed the bomb, unaware of the decoy. When Cappy tells him they can't disarm it in 5 minutes, David comes up with a desperate plan. He contacts Jean and asks her to meet him in the lower galley. David and Jean emerge into the cabin with David posing as a terrorist, gun to her back. Louis alerts Rat that David is moving toward the suspected sleeper. David grabs the pocket computer from seat 21K only to discover smuggled diamonds. The man is not the sleeper. Scanning the cabin, David finally spots Jean-Paul Demus. Demus immediately starts typing on his device. David shoots at him. The gunshot draws Naji's attention, but the U.S. Air Marshal fires first, taking Naji down. David tackles Demus and knocks the pocket computer away. On Louis' signal, Rat kills the lights and the team storms the cabin, eliminating the remaining terrorists. Demus overpowers David and keeps typing. Louis shoots him, but with his last breath, Demus hits enter. Down below, Cahill, trying to jam the triggers with a non-metallic object, miraculously wedges a straw into place just in time. The bomb is disarmed. During the chaos, stray gunfire punctures the fuselage, sucking few passengers out and sending the plane into violent decompression. As pressure drops, the straw begins to slip, but Cahill manages to force it back in. David fears the worst until Baker hands him the radio, where Cahill and Cappy are laughing in relief. The bomb is neutralized. In first class, David finds Rat wounded and Naji still alive. David shows Naji the pocket computer, telling him it's over. With a final act of defiance, Naji shoots into the cockpit, killing the pilots. Rat regains consciousness and executes Naji, ending the threat once and for all. David climbs into the pilot's seat, completely out of his depth. Jean rushes in, and David asks her to relay flight instructions as he struggles to keep the plane steady. He manages to gain control but overshoots the runway at Dulles. Thinking fast, David remembers the small airfield where he learned to fly. With one last push, he guides the damaged plane in and pulls off a miraculous landing. Afterward, David says goodbye to Cahill and the team. He then finds Jean, asks her out, and the two leave together.
So, Jean, tell me something. Do you like hockey?
If you enjoyed this recap, please like the video, share it with someone, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.